Hey, welcome back. My name is Alex. And in the last video, I showed you how to detect the ListView scroll event in NativeScript, but we did this on iOS. In this video, I'm going to show you how to detect the ListView scroll event in NativeScript using native API calls. And we're going to do this on Android. If you're not subscribed yet to this channel, we do NativeScript tips, tricks, and tutorials here, so make sure you hit that subscribe button and click the little bell next to it so you get notified whenever there's new videos that come out about NativeScript. And why would you want to miss those, right? So last time we detected the ListView scroll event by calling native APIs. We extended the iOS delegate for the UI table view to be able to detect and hook into the NativeScript ListView component through native API calls on iOS. And we were able to detect when the ListView scrolled, when the ListView stops scrolling, all those things that you don't get out of the box with NativeScript, but you can get those by just calling native APIs. And this was a lesson taken out of the NativeScript Core Pro course, just taken straight out of there and posted right here. Same thing with this lesson. This is also from the NativeScript Core Pro course, and I'm sharing that with you because it's a really, really interesting thing to be able to do, and a lot of people ask me about how to get this done. If you don't know about the course I'm talking about, check out nativescripting.com. You'll find links down below along with discount codes where we have free courses for NativeScript to get you started, as well as more advanced courses to get you up to speed and be able to develop full NativeScript application from start to finish. And we have courses for NativeScript Core with JavaScript, TypeScript, Angular, and Vue. So yeah, this lesson kind of picks up where the previous lesson finished, where we did iOS, and I'll link to that video down below as well. Today we're doing Android API calls, so here we go. We can also detect the scroll event on Android list as well, and it's much easier to implement than iOS, especially now because we have a lot of the infrastructure already in place. We have our scroll listener in place. We're not going to touch that. We're not going to have a separate delegate. All we're going to work on is the utils here, and this is the add scroll listener function. So here, we're going to reach into the Android property here, which is of type any, so now we're on our own. Next, we're going to set on scroll listener, and here we're going to create a new instance of android.widget.abstractListView.onScrollListener. You can check out the Android documentation for the write-up about that. And this is going to take in a specific object which has two events on it, onScroll and also onScrollStateChange. You even get IntelliSense here about that. Here are the two events that are going to be triggered. Now onScroll is going to take in a few parameters. View the first visible item, which is a very interesting one that could be useful. Visible item count, that's how many items are on the screen, and the total item count. You should already know that. And every time we scroll, we're going to call the ListView scroll listener that we've implemented, and we're going to call that scrolled function on it. So that also takes in the current position. And in order to get the current position, I'm going to export a function here, which is going to be Android specific, get current Y position. We've already implemented the iOS one, which has the exact same signature. We did that in the previous lesson. This takes in a list view and returns a number. And we're going to calculate the position, which is going to be on our list view .android.compute vertical scroll offset. Let's return that position. So whenever we scroll, we're going to trigger the scrolled event and we're going to pass in this result of this function, get current Y position. We're going to come back to onScrollStateChange in a second, but let's take a look at the result here. So here's our Android list, and here we have our output. So whenever I scroll, you can see that we have our current position being output to the screen. And this works even after a swipe scroll. So while the list is still scrolling, even after I let go, you still have the scroll event being triggered. Now I have seen a couple of these Java I/O exceptions being thrown, but this looks like there's an issue with downloading the images and not an issue with the scroll event itself. So there might be an issue with the images being too large and the list view not being able to handle such large images so quickly. So what about this other event here? onScrollStateChanged. This takes in a view and a scroll state as the parameters. And scroll state will allow you to figure out what is going on with the state. Did you just start scrolling? Did you continue scrolling? Are you idling? What are you doing? So here we can do an if statement, And if scroll state is equal to Android.widget.abstract list view on scroll listener dot, and here we have a couple of different flags that we can check for. For example, idle. Let me give us a little bit more space to work with here. So if scroll state is idle, that means we've essentially stopped dragging or the list stopped scrolling. But how do we tell those two apart? There is no separate event for the list stopped scrolling by itself like there is on iOS. So we can just keep track of that using a flag here inside the function. So I'm going to create a flag called Android dragging. I'm going to set that to false initially. And here I'm going to check if Android is not dragging. That means we've stopped and we weren't dragging. So that means SL scroll halted. We can call this function. This is the one that stopped by itself. Otherwise, if we were dragging and the list is now idle, that means we've stopped dragging. So I'm going to call SL drag stop. There's other states we can handle. So else if, let me just copy this whole thing right here because it's kind of long to type. And all we got to do is just change this enum right here to scroll state touch scroll. All right. And this one we have to check to see if we are dragging, or rather if we're not dragging. If Android dragging is false, that means we're starting to drag. So I'm going to call the drag start function and I'm going to set Android dragging to true. Oh, that formatting is a little bit crazy after I save. Thanks, Prettier. You make things pretty but hard to follow. Okay, let's take a look at the command line here, and I'm going to go to my Android device and I'm going to do some scrolling here. So I'm going to scroll and you can see that drag start was called. Then there was a little bit of scrolling going on and then drag stop. Very useful stuff here, right folks? So if you are interested in seeing content like this, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the little bell next to subscribe so you don't miss any NativeScript tips, tricks, and tutorials that we do here. You can also reach me. I'm on Twitter @Digitalex. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.